A single wrong step changed 2 lives forever. The young woman standing at the harbor had nothing left except a weathered backpack, a folded letter from her late grandmother, and a heart exhausted from disappointment. When she accidentally boarded an elegant private ferry meant for someone else, every crew member assumed she belonged there. Only one man knew the truth. He owned the ferry. He watched her quietly from the upper deck, and for reasons even he didn't fully understand, he never corrected her. Before we begin, if you believe kindness can change a life, forgiveness can heal broken hearts, hope should never be abandoned, and second chances are worth giving, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing family. Clara Bennett had spent most of her 28 years believing that if she worked hard enough, life would eventually reward her. Instead, it seemed to punish every effort she made. After losing her teaching position because the small school where she worked closed unexpectedly, she had burned through her savings caring for her grandmother Eleanor during a long illness. When Eleanor passed away, Clara discovered an old handwritten letter tucked inside a faded Bible. The letter spoke about a tiny island Eleanor had once visited as a young woman, a peaceful place where she had found the courage to rebuild her own life after losing everything. At the bottom of the page was one sentence underlined twice: "If your heart is ever too heavy to carry, go there before making your next decision." That single sentence became Clara's last thread of hope. She sold the few valuables she still owned, bought the cheapest ferry ticket she could afford, and traveled to the coastal harbor. The docks were crowded with tourists, workers, delivery crews, and wealthy visitors preparing for luxury vacations. Signs pointed in every direction. Ferries arrived and departed every few minutes. Confused by the noise and the crowd, Clara followed a group carrying expensive luggage toward a sleek white vessel tied to a private dock. No one questioned her simple clothes or worn backpack. The crew politely welcomed her aboard, assuming she was another guest traveling under special arrangements. She found a quiet seat near the railing, too overwhelmed to notice the polished wood, attentive staff, and luxurious surroundings that were completely different from the public ferry she had intended to board. From the upper deck, Julian Mercer watched everything. At 43, Julian had built one of the country's most respected hospitality companies. His private island was famous among business leaders and celebrities, but very few people knew its owner had once grown up in poverty. Years of success had surrounded him with people who always wanted something from him. Genuine encounters had become painfully rare. The moment he noticed Clara staring nervously at the sea instead of admiring the yacht-like ferry, he realized she wasn't one of his invited guests. One quiet conversation with the captain confirmed it. She had boarded the wrong vessel. The captain politely asked whether he should explain the mistake before departure. Julian looked toward the young woman clutching an old envelope as though it contained her entire future. For reasons he couldn't explain, he simply shook his head. The ferry left the harbor. During the crossing, Clara spent most of the journey reading and rereading her grandmother's letter. Every few minutes she wiped away tears before anyone noticed. She wasn't pretending to belong among wealthy travelers. She simply believed she had somehow found an unusually beautiful public ferry. Julian continued observing from a distance. He noticed she accepted only water when refreshments were offered. He noticed she thanked every crew member with sincere gratitude. Most importantly, he noticed she smiled whenever she looked at the coastline, despite carrying obvious sadness. People usually revealed their character when they believed no one important was watching. When the island appeared on the horizon, Clara's breath caught. Green cliffs rose above crystal blue water. Wildflowers covered rolling hills. Small stone cottages rested among ancient trees. Everything matched her grandmother's description almost perfectly. She stepped onto the dock with tears already forming. She had no idea she wasn't supposed to be there. As invited guests were escorted toward luxurious villas, Clara quietly wandered in another direction, following a narrow walking trail. No one stopped her because the island staff assumed she had permission to explore. She eventually found an old wooden bench overlooking the sea. According to Eleanor's letter, this exact overlook had changed her life more than 50 years earlier. Clara sat there for nearly an hour. She cried without embarrassment. She spoke softly to the grandmother she still missed every single day. She admitted she didn't know what came next. She confessed she felt like she had failed. Julian happened to pass nearby during his morning inspection of the property. He wasn't trying to spy. He simply stopped walking. Listening from a respectful distance, he heard words so honest they pierced through years of emotional walls he had built around himself. There were no complaints about unfairness. No bitterness. Only grief. And hope struggling to stay alive. For the first time in years, Julian remembered his own mother sitting beside him after his father's death, telling him that life would never promise fairness, but it would always leave room for kindness. He quietly walked away before Clara noticed him. Instead of ordering security to escort her off the island, he instructed the staff to treat her like every other guest. Throughout the afternoon, unexpected moments kept bringing their paths together. Clara helped an elderly visitor who had dropped his walking cane. She gathered scattered sketchbooks for a young artist after a sudden ocean breeze carried them across the path. She even stopped to comfort a frightened little girl separated briefly from her parents until they were reunited minutes later. She never asked for recognition. She simply acted. Julian found himself watching someone who reminded him of the person's success had slowly convinced him no longer existed. Someone genuinely good. Late in the morning, Clara discovered a neglected community garden hidden behind one of the cottages. Many flowers had wilted from weeks without attention. Without asking permission, she spent nearly 2 hours pulling weeds, watering plants, and gently restoring the small space. When one groundskeeper thanked her, she simply smiled and admitted working in gardens always made her feel closer to her grandmother. That afternoon Julian finally introduced himself. Not as the island owner. Simply as another visitor spending time there. Their conversation flowed naturally. Clara spoke about teaching children, missing her grandmother, and wondering whether starting over was still possible after losing nearly everything. Julian shared stories from his childhood without mentioning his wealth. He admitted success had filled his calendar but somehow emptied parts of his life that once mattered most. For hours they walked through gardens, forests, and quiet coastal paths. Neither realized how deeply the other needed that conversation. Everything changed when one of Julian's executives arrived unexpectedly by helicopter. The man greeted Julian as Mr. Mercer before discussing business matters in front of Clara. She froze. Every puzzle piece suddenly fit together. The private ferry. The luxury accommodations. The respectful staff. The beautiful island. Julian wasn't another visitor. He owned everything. Embarrassment flooded her face. She immediately apologized, explaining she had boarded the wrong ferry by mistake. She offered to leave immediately and repay whatever costs she had unknowingly created, even though she clearly had no money to do so. Julian quietly admitted he had known from the beginning. The words landed like another wave. Her expression changed from embarrassment to hurt. She couldn't understand why someone would allow her to believe a misunderstanding all day. Although Julian explained he hadn't wanted to destroy the peace she'd found, Clara struggled to accept it. She thanked him for his kindness but insisted on leaving. Sometimes even good intentions leave painful wounds. As the return ferry prepared for departure, Julian watched Clara standing alone at the dock. He suddenly realized something uncomfortable. He had spent years making complicated business decisions worth millions of dollars. Yet he had failed at the simplest decision. Telling one honest truth at the right time. He hurried toward the dock before the ferry departed. This time he didn't hide behind wealth, status, or careful explanations. He apologized completely. He admitted he had been selfish because watching someone experience genuine hope reminded him of emotions he had buried beneath endless work. He confessed that meeting her had forced him to recognize how lonely success had become. Clara listened quietly. She could see real regret in his eyes. Not polished words. Real regret. She accepted his apology. Forgiveness didn't erase the mistake. But it allowed both of them to keep walking forward. Before she boarded, Julian handed her a small envelope. Inside was not money. Not a luxury gift. Instead, it contained information about a teaching foundation his mother had established years earlier before her death. The foundation had recently opened a learning center for children from struggling coastal communities. They desperately needed a teacher. He explained that after watching Clara care for strangers all day, he believed she belonged there more than anyone his organization could recruit through ordinary interviews. Clara stared at the papers with disbelief. The salary was enough to rebuild her life. The work matched everything she loved. The island her grandmother had written about had somehow become the place where her future was waiting. She accepted the opportunity. Over the following months, children who had once dreaded school began arriving early every morning because Miss Bennet made learning feel like adventure instead of obligation. Parents noticed remarkable changes in their children's confidence. The neglected community garden became a living classroom where students learned science, responsibility, and compassion together. Julian visited the school often, not as an executive inspecting operations but as someone eager to witness hope growing in places where it had once been absent. Their friendship deepened slowly through honesty instead of appearances. Neither rushed what life was patiently building. Julian learned that real wealth wasn't measured by ownership but by the number of lives made brighter through generosity. Clara learned that one mistaken step doesn't always lead to disaster. Sometimes it leads exactly where the heart was meant to arrive. A year later, the old bench overlooking the sea became a place of celebration instead of sorrow. Clara returned carrying fresh flowers for her grandmother's memory. She thanked Eleanor for writing the letter that had guided her across the water, even if she had reached the island in the most unexpected way imaginable. Standing nearby, Julian understood something he had searched years to find. The greatest investments were never companies or properties. They were people. People who reminded us who we were before fear, pride, and disappointment changed us. Before we reach the end, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever made what seemed like a terrible mistake, only to discover later that it changed your life for the better? Please leave a meaningful comment and share the lesson your journey taught you. Your story may become the hope someone else needs today. As the afternoon sun painted the ocean with golden light, Clara looked toward the harbor where one wrong ferry had carried her into an entirely different future. She smiled without sadness this time because she finally understood her grandmother's final lesson. Hope rarely arrives through perfect plans. More often, it quietly hides inside unexpected detours, waiting for brave hearts willing to keep moving forward even when they don't understand the path. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. And always remember, one act of kindness, one honest apology, and one unexpected second chance can transform an ordinary day into the beginning of an extraordinary life.